Well, US President Donald Trump has said that he and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping approved a deal on the future of TikTok's US operations during a phone call on Friday. Trump wrote on Truth Social that the call was productive and he appreciated Xi's approval of the deal, which would reportedly see TikTok's US business sold to a group of US investors. TikTok, which is run by Chinese firm ByteDance, was previously told it had to sell its US operations or risks being shut down. However, Trump delayed implementing the ban 4 times since it was first announced in January, and earlier this week extended the deadline again to December. Let's listen in to what Trump has to say on the TikTok deal.
I had a great call with President Xi, and as you know, he approved the TikTok deal, and we're in the process. We have some great investors, some of the biggest in the world, American investors, great people, and we look forward to getting that deal closed. We're going to have a very tight control. And look, it's an amazing thing that's been created. There's tremendous value with TikTok. And I'm a little prejudiced because I frankly did so well on it. And the United States really, I see it. I mean, people were saying, save TikTok, save TikTok. So many people. It's a big thing. And, you know, China can be very proud that they were able to get that started. And so I very much appreciate President Xi's working with us on that.
Mr. Andrew K.P. Luing, Chinese strategist, joins us from Hong Kong. So thank you so much for your time on NewsX World. I'd like to understand from you, what do you make of this TikTok deal between US and China, and who wins what?
Well, of course, it's the relationship between the United States and China is the most important and most problematic international relations in the world between the two great powers. And it's not just about TikTok only. Of course, TikTok is important, it's now the front page, but it's much more than that. It's the kind of tussle for global influence between these two great powers. And the tussle is driven not just by talk, not just by commonly accepted rules, and not just by concerns about human rights or by international law, as highlighted by the previous 2 episodes in the United Nations or on the high seas, but it's driven by power, by sheer national power. And there's a tussle between the national powers of the two countries. Now, as far as TikTok is concerned, of course, it has been very popular amongst the young people in the United States. And as President Trump said, it helped him to win back the White House. But on the other hand, TikTok is governed by the China's algorithms, the intellectual property rights. It's not just governing the TikTok platform in the United States. It's also TikTok in other countries, in Europe, in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia. It's a huge market and also influence out there. And of course, the TikTok is the only English version. The original of the TikTok social media platform is in China. It's called the Red Note or the Xiaohongshu. In fact, there's been a great deal of migrants from the TikTok milieu in the United States to Red Note, using its algorithms, enabling the two people to talk to one another. And so it's a part of the tussle for influence. Now, if you look at the readouts on both sides, there are very little direct confirmation that a deal has been done. President Trump used the word approves, that presidency approves, but if you read the Chinese readout, it's all on principles, on the kind of principles that should govern the relationship between the two countries, suggesting that even though both sides want a deal, but then there's not yet a firm agreement. And particularly, it's also instructive that President Xi has confirmed his visit to Beijing, but rather referring to President Xi's intention to visit the United States at an appropriate time. That means that which side is more eager for the deal? And obviously, President Trump is very eager for the deal because he wants to show that he is a broker for peace, and either in the Middle East or on Ukraine, and he wants to win the Nobel Prize. And then the midterm elections is coming up in the United States, and as far as China is concerned, he's really running out of cards. But China has now got its trump card to rebuff the United States, namely its monopoly and dominance over the rare earth elements, which find its use in strategic assets like the F-35 fighters. So I think that the Chinese side seems more relaxed compared with Trump's mantra. But yes, both sides are moving towards closer because the negotiations are still continuing. And hence, President Trump even float up the possibility of further extending the deadline, suggesting that the talks are far from being over. The devil still remains in the detail.
Right, absolutely. So with that, I'd like to thank you for joining us.